Hello, I'm Anthony, here today to talk about Materials, Wood and Water, the latest plugin by Steinberg for their Halion suite of software. Now I've got it loaded in Halion 6 here, but any instance of Halion including Sonic or SE versions will be absolutely fine. So in order to load this thing up, we head into our Load tab and we look for Wood and Water. That's going to give you a set of presets. I'll have a wander through some of those today and show you some of the features of the plugin. Let's start with Analog Saw. So in Halion 6, we then get to the synthesizer via the Macro tab, and here we have the interface. So let's hear it first. Awful lot going on there. But before we dive into the instruments themselves, let's just have a quick look at the primary interface, because even though it appears to be very sparsely featured, this is actually where we do a lot of our modulation configuration. Can you see this thing bouncing up and down on the left hand side? That's an automatic low frequency oscillator, and this master modulation control is capable of being routed to 4 different targets. You can see them: volume, pan, cutoff and distortion, and how much effect they have on each of the individual instruments is controlled from this little pop-up window where we can see yet another set of sliders. So I think the best way to demonstrate how this works is to turn most of the stuff off so that we can hear what's actually going on. So we're just listening to the dirty digital sound now. That sounds like this. Quite a nice synth bluff. We've got 4 different modulation targets that we can choose from. The master depth for each one of those modulations is set with the overall sliders, so you can see that distortion has no part to play in this particular preset. But then the amount of modulation that's going to be applied to this individual instrument is controlled by these little slider curtains. So I can pull these things backwards and forwards, I can invert them, make them basically go opposite to the way that you would ordinarily expect them to. So with that current setting, as this modulation amount goes up and down, you're going to hear this instrument get quieter and louder. Let's introduce some pan. And let's slow it down. If I decide I don't want any modulation for the overall synth sound, I can just pull the master slider down, but we'll still hear the pan. If we head over into this little pop-up and I press the auto button, it shuts down. Now we control the overall amount of modulation from our mod wheel. If we hover over the control, you can see that it says mod wheel. So here's me pressing a key, turn the mod wheel all the way down. As I increase the modulation wheel, you can hear me, well, you can actually see visually in the output meter, we're panned fully hard right now. And there's fully left, or as much left as this thing is going to let me go. Let's bring the circular saw in, why not? Okay, now that's doing a quite violent pan thing. If you're listening in stereo, you'll be hearing it whistle left and right, and you can see in the output something pretty brutal's going on. And it's not coming from the main modulation screen. You see the majority of the modulation for this particular preset isn't being controlled from this master screen. So let's dive in to the instrument itself and have a look what's going on. I'm just going to click the name, and here we are now in the instrument interface. Got some tabs across the bottom that are going to get us to our various controls. And if we want to toggle between the 4 different instruments, we do that with these little buttons up at the top. Because circular saw is number 3, that's the one we're currently looking at, but we can edit any of the instruments from up there. So let's have a hunt for that auto pan effect to see if we can find it. Well, my first thought is that it must be in the motion tab, because obviously it's something that's in motion. And sure enough, we've got 3 different motion engines for each instrument: LFO, step and arpeggiator. They can all be independently activated or deactivated, and you can see that the LFO is currently on. This triangle wave, with a pretty strong strength setting, 80%, is what's causing the pan. You see, pan is the destination. So if I press my key down again, there's the pan. This is the speed at which we're cycling. We're synced to our host BPM at half time. And this is the amount that we're doing it by. So you can hear I've just calmed that pan down a little bit now. If we head over to the filter tab at the bottom of the interface, you can see we've got controls for different types of filters, various different shapes that we can choose from. Let's pick a high pass filter, for instance. Now we're going to be throwing away all the low frequencies. Now, a lot of that brutality for this particular sound, despite the fact that it's actually a sampled circular saw, is coming from we've got this very high distortion rate set. I'll pull that down. And now we can hear more of the natural sample under the hood. Speaking of the natural sample, we have two. There's two separate layers. I'm just going to switch back to a low pass filter and turn my resonance back down so that we can hear this thing a little bit more clearly. Okay, so there's circular saw number 1, circular saw number 2. Add those two things together. And salt to taste. Some pretty basic settings over here, most of them are pretty self-explanatory, volume and pan, etc. And we've got 3 dedicated sends. So these are master sends, reverb, delay and transform. We gain access to the overall controls for these send effects from our master settings. Here's our master page. Here's the reverb, delay. Transformer isn't used in this particular preset. We also have some post effects. In other words, these effects are going to be applied to the entire preset, so EQ and saturator, etc. So having had a very brief whistle-stop tour of some of the primary features, let's load a new sound and see if we can stretch its legs. Very slow attack on it. I'm just going to speed the attack up a little bit so that it's a tiny bit easier to play. Envelope in every one of our instruments. So I'll just pull that back for some of them. See what that sounds like. It's a bit more responsive there. Have a look at what the automated modulator is doing over here. So it's not immediately obvious, well, it might not have been immediately obvious to you that there's this very heavy pan, but if we focus in on the digital, it most certainly is. When it's blended with all of the other instruments, it's not quite that dramatic. Very nice. And if we want to just de-emphasize that pan a little bit, no problem, just pull the master pan down. Some of the instruments are fully fledged synthesizers. Halion is an extremely powerful engine. I've actually done a very long tutorial series on Halion some time ago, but I'll put a link to it above. But some of the presets, you can actually access some of the internal synth settings. If we just solo one of these instruments and open the search window, you can see all the various different basic synth plugin types. If you narrow down onto the synth option and pick one of these, when we head back into the main interface, you've got a new button. Here's the synth edit button, and this is showing you that this particular instrument type is a granular synthesizer. Now, granular synthesis is a very complicated subject. In fact, everything about Halion is potentially very complicated. The beauty of these plugins is that a lot of that complexity is hidden from you and you just get the best stuff. So we're going to have a bit of a play, but rather than me making the changes from the interface, I'll actually map them to a couple of quick controls. That's really easy to do. Just put the quick controls in learn mode, create a new automation slot for the speed control, and you can see that got assigned to slot number 1. I'll just pick slot number 2 and assign that over there. And that's as easy as that. That's how to assign controls inside Halion to quick controls almost instantly. And now controls numbers 1 and 2 on my keyboard are affecting that stuff dynamically. So let's have a bit of a play with this sound now, controlling some of these granular options. Make them go backwards as well. So it's now basically literally playing the sample in reverse. By increasing the duration of each grain, you can hear it stretching out in time. Really fabulous fun. I'm just holding C down here, having too much fun messing with the granular settings. You very often get that quite harsh, kind of otherworldly sound from granular. Very nice. Let's dial up another preset, see what else we can do. Okay, let's have some fun with this one. We've got a storm in the background. We've got an EBO rattling, and then we've got a couple of synth sounds. Drop the attack on this wide grain bends to make it a little bit more responsive. And I want to dirty it up. Let's add some tube distortion. Very nice. Now let's arpeggiate it. Oh, not that fast. There we go. Seconds it takes to get a lovely sound out of this thing. Really enjoying playing with it. Hope you enjoyed that little walkthrough, found it useful. If you did, please hit like. Thanks very much for watching.